All right, so we are in Proverbs chapter 27. We're working our way through the book of Proverbs, roughly a chapter a Sunday. And then just in case you're curious, after we finish the book of Proverbs, we'll jump into 2 Corinthians on Sunday mornings. And on Wednesday nights, we're working our way through 1 Corinthians. And so after we're done with 1 Corinthians, on Wednesday nights, we'll jump into the book of Isaiah. So again, we're alternating between Old and New Testament, both on Wednesdays and Sundays, and working our way through the Bible. So that way you know where we're headed and what we're doing. Proverbs 27, verse 1. Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring forth. What a wonderful statement, and we find mirror statements in the New Testament regarding this as well. But remember, the book of Proverbs, this particular section of Proverbs, is written by Solomon, but they were collected later by others who then put it down for us to have, or for those in that time. Solomon is referring primarily to his son, and we'll see that's important as we work through this, as a dad trying to give wisdom or instruction to his son. And remember, as we've worked through our way through Proverbs, we've noted a couple of things. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom and foolishness. So wisdom and fools are contrasted with each other. And we've defined, of course, the fear of the Lord is not being scared or shaking in your boots, but instead the fear of the Lord is an honor, a respect for the Lord. A life that's lived before or with respect for the Lord. I mentioned earlier to you during the announcements about Jehoshaphat. He's a man in that season of his life who recognized and had a respect for the Lord. When he found himself in trouble, he immediately cried out to the Lord. That's somebody who exercises wisdom. Wisdom is not just knowledge. Many of us can have the knowledge about Jesus Christ, but wisdom is the practical putting it into practice. It's living day to day with Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. The fool, on the other hand, is somebody who rejects a relationship with Jesus Christ. And again, as we work our way through this chapter of Proverbs, you'll see these two compared to each other. The wise, that would be those who have a vibrant, living relationship which begins with Jesus Christ. And the fool is the person who absolutely rejects God. And so he gives us these tidbits of wisdom. And one of these tidbits here in verse 1 is don't boast about tomorrow. Because honestly, we don't know. We can make plans, and it's fine, and it's wonderful for us to have plans, ideas. Excuse me. My good. Thank you. All right. That was coming for a while, too. You ever have a sneeze that's coming for a while, and you're trying to hold it back? And anyways, wisdom would say, I can make plans, but I'm not going to boast about what I might do or what I won't do. For example, in the book of James, chapter 4, we're given this in verses 13 through 16. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell, and make a profit, whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. See, again, there's nothing wrong with making plans. Maybe you've got a career plan, you got a career path, or you got college plans, or you've got plans to buy this thing or that thing. Nothing wrong with making those plans, but you need to submit those plans to the lordship of Jesus Christ. For what is life? It's even but a vapor, okay? Life. As much as somebody who maybe lives to be 100 years old, and we might think, man, that was somebody who lived a full life. Compared to eternity, it is just but a vapor. Those who have had loved ones die know that it's sudden. It's sometimes unexpected. Sometimes people die young or unexpectedly. And our lives aren't that. We can't make all these plans and be boastful about what you or I are going to do. Instead, what it says here, your life is but a vapor, and it appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, so again, it's not don't make plans, but instead of saying, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to graduate college, then I'm going to get this degree, and I'm going to do this thing at work and so forth, and I'm going to go on all these things. Instead, what we ought to say, if the Lord wills, then we will live and do this or that. So again, in context with James, it's okay to say, hey, I've got this business deal, or I'm planning to do this at work, or change my careers. Nothing wrong with that, but submit yourself to, if the Lord wills. My life is in the Lord's hands. That's the attitude here that Solomon is portraying to us. Verse 2, let another man praise you and not your own mouth, a stranger and not your own lips. So here what we have this idea is we are not to be about promoting ourselves. You see, as a Christian, we're not to be in this game of self-promotion. Now, in the world that we live in, we're constantly told by others you have to promote yourself. And our modern technology, or the social media and things like that, lend itself to somebody promoting themselves. Nothing wrong with you getting credit for a job well done. Nothing wrong for somebody to say to you, hey, you did a really good job at this. Somebody recognizing or recommending you for a job or a position. The key here is that we are called as Christians to be humble and to stay away from this mentality of self-promotion. It doesn't mean you can't apply for a new position at work. It doesn't mean that you can't submit a resume for a new or better job or something else like that. But it's the idea of somebody who's bragging about all the great things they can do. You ever run across people like that? No matter what they say, they are the best. They're the hero in every story that they tell. That heart, when somebody's doing that, is not humble before the Lord. Verse 3, a heavy stone and sand is weighty. Now, it's kind of obvious. Stones and sand is weighty, but a fool's wrath is heavier than both of them. Again, a fool is somebody who rejects the wisdom of God. What does the wisdom of God say? You need a relationship with Jesus Christ. So a fool is somebody who rejects Jesus Christ. And when somebody rejects Jesus Christ, when they begin to express their anger and the wrath, it's weighty, it's heavier than stones and sand, and it's a dangerous thing. Again, somebody who doesn't have a right relationship with God lives under this constant cloud of the conviction of the Holy Spirit. Now, they may not recognize it. They may say, oh, I'm good. I don't need anybody else. But inside, and each of you know what it's like to be in rebellion to the Lord and have that heavy weight from the Lord, which creates an anger or an angst in our own hearts and minds. So be careful of those who are not walking with Jesus Christ. Because when they get angry, when they get frustrated, which they're prone to do, understand that it's weightier or heavier than even a heavy stone or weight. In other words, it's dangerous. And verse 7 continue with the same thing. Wrath is cruel and anger a torrent. But who is able to stand before jealousy? Somebody can be cruel or have wrath. They'll be wrathful. Somebody can have anger and it can overwhelm them. But jealousy is even a stronger emotion than both of those things. This metaphor here depicts anger as a spiritual force that is destructive, irrational, and violent. You ever run across, maybe you've witnessed yourself, that you become angry at things and logic sort of just goes out the window and all you're responding on is just pure emotion. So those are true statements. And Solomon points out here that the power is destructive, and jealousy, again, another emotion, it can be much more destructive than just anger or wrath. So guard your hearts against being jealous. You see, if we have a right relationship with Jesus Christ, we will have the ability to allow Christ to control our emotions. We're emotional, all of us. Now, some of you express your emotions more freely than others, but we all are emotional. God created us with emotions. Emotions aren't wrong. It's what we do with those emotions. Okay? Jealousy is the idea that somebody has something else that you want, and then you become angry or envious of that. And that jealousy can override your logic. Anger and wrath, the same sort of thing. That's why we have problems with road rage on our roads, is because somebody becomes angry, frustrated with what others are doing, and all of a sudden they kind of snap, and they're just working on an emotional level and not logic. And so be careful with that. Again, God made you emotional. There's nothing wrong with being frustrated with something, but what do you do with that frustration? Are you turning it back to the Lord? Verse 5, open rebuke is better than love carefully concealed. Now, this might be a familiar proverb to you, but the idea here is that somebody who says something to correct you, it's better for them to do that than somebody who says that they love you but never expresses it. Rebuke. Now, understand this. When we talk about rebuke, we're talking about somebody with a heart that, first of all, is kind. It's not just, I'm going to yell at somebody and just try to put them in their place, but an open rebuke, or rebuke done in a biblical way, is first of all kind, and it's considerate, and it's prayerfully administered. Remember, some of the gifts of the Spirit is kindness, patience, self-control. So don't use rebuke as an excuse for you just to go off and tell somebody off. That's not the case here. Biblical rebuke is somebody who's kind, even though they're saying something that's difficult for the other person to receive. They're considering what's the best time and the best way to phrase this. Not trying to candy coat it, but at the same time being aware, because the heart of somebody who's giving a godly rebuke is to restore this person to a right relationship. That's the heart of it. And if you're going to rebuke somebody, and we all are called to do that sort of thing, we need to do it prayerfully. Lord, the right words at the right time to be able to minister to this person. Again, the rebuke is not to put somebody down, but instead to urge them on to a right relationship. And when we're willing to risk a friendship by telling somebody, you've got spinach in your teeth, or something else that maybe is embarrassing, it literally cements or strengthens that relationship. So don't shrink back from sharing with others. And it's much better to openly say to somebody, you are wrong in this area or that area. But again, kindness, consideration, and prayerfulness needs to be interwoven in that. But the highest level of love is love that's expressed to somebody else. And it's expressed through our actions. It's more than just words. You see, if God just used words towards you and I, we would not comprehend the level of love that He has for us. For the Scriptures tells us in a number of places that God demonstrates, in other words, He shows His love for us by sending His only begotten Son. You and I know the love of God because we can examine, we can look at the crucifixion of Christ. We can look at absolutely holy God becoming man for the sake of taking on the penalty of my sin, and we can say, that is somebody who acted in love. And this is that agape love, this unconditional, not expecting anything back kind of love. Over in 1 John, it tells us that we are called to love one another as Christ has loved us. Now that's a difficult standard to live to love somebody unconditionally without expecting things back. And that's the kind of love we're supposed to have towards one another. And so it's much better to openly say to somebody, you're wrong in this area, again with kindness, consideration, prayerfulness, than it is to be quiet in the corner and say, well, they know I love them. Can you imagine, husbands and wives, if you expressed your love to your spouse on your wedding day and then never did anything else for the rest of your marriage to express love towards your spouse? Would that be a healthy relationship? I hope you all are thinking, no way, that's absolutely silly and ridiculous. And if we as human beings can understand that, how much greater is God's love towards us? So risk it. Be willing to say to somebody, hey, this is a miss in your life, but again, do it with kindness, consideration of them receiving it with the goal of the heart restored to a right relationship. Moving on to verse 6. Faithful is kind of same idea here. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. Okay, when somebody rebukes you because you are out of line, understand it's faithful, or they're considering you, as opposed to somebody who just gives you all kinds of flattery. You might recall that Judas Iscariot betrayed Jesus with what? A kiss in the Garden of Gethsemane. Genuine love is not something that's just flattery. And whenever somebody's too flattery towards you, that should send up all kinds of red flags. Now, wait a minute, something's amiss here. You know, if you have children, they come to you and they want something. Usually they start off, if they've if they've developed a little bit, they start off by saying, "Oh, Daddy, I like you so much," or "You did this," or "You did that. Hey, this is wonderful." And then they hit you with a zinger. "I need $100 to do this," or whatever else it is. And we as people tend to do that. You go to your boss and you want time off. You might first say, "Well, hey, I think you're doing a great job. I think you're an excellent supervisor. I think you're the best one here. By the way, can I have tomorrow off?" So be careful when people are just giving you flattery as opposed to telling you the truth. This metaphor here, the wounds, are wounds of words being spoken, not just physically hitting somebody. And of course, it's not describing that, but it's this idea of true friendship is willing to inflict perhaps something that somebody doesn't like. Tell them the truth, even though they're not going to like it, for the sake of restoring or strengthening that friendship. Moving on to verse 7. A satisfied soul loathes the honeycomb, but a hungry soul, even a bitter thing, is sweet. And again, this is a metaphor here about those who are satisfied with either physical things, material possessions, or even we feel satisfied or complacent in our walks with Jesus Christ. Then even something as sweet as honeycomb becomes, well, drudgery. I've studied the Bible before, I've done this before, and I'm not really that interested in it. However, have you ever noticed that if you're really hungry, almost anything, you'll eat anything? When you're not that hungry, you're pretty picky, aren't you? Well, I don't want this, I don't want that. But when you start getting hungry, then pretty soon, the fast food kind of foods all of a sudden look really attractive. All of a sudden, a cheeseburger is just as good to you as a filet mignon or something else like that. And so, spiritually, we need to guard ourselves that we don't become complacent with our walks in our relationship with Jesus Christ. Instead, we need to hunger and thirst for righteousness, like Jesus told us. Verse 8, like a bird that wanders from its nest is a man who wanders from his place. Now, this could be applied to both men and women. Remember, this is Solomon, a father, writing wisdom to his son. And he's saying, just like a bird wanders around, and especially a young bird or a chick, when it gets out of its nest, it's in danger, right? It's springtime. Birds are going to start to hatch pretty soon. And unfortunately, we're prone to find a baby chick that wandered out of the nest prematurely, right? And was consumed by some other animal or just simply fell to its death. And so we have to be careful. These words are the words of looking at the birds around us and noticing that we do need a place of safety and security. And that's found in where we belong. Where do we belong? We belong in the fellowship of saints, the fellowship of believers. Be careful that we don't just jump around from spiritual experience to spiritual experience, but instead allow yourself to be ingrained in a local body where you can grow, where somebody can come and say, you know what? Spiritually, you've got spinach in your teeth. I love you, but I'm telling you, you got this area of your life that you're blind to. And be careful, just because somebody might say something like that, not to get offended and just run away. Instead, look at it as an opportunity to grow in your relationship with Jesus Christ. Verse 7, ointment and perfume delight the heart, and the sweetness of a man's friend gives delight by hearty counsel. Ointment, the idea of a salve or an ointment. Of course, in ancient days, they used oil, different oils and that sort of thing as a healing element. Like us today, if you have a cut or a scar, you might put some ointment, some Neosporin or something else on it to help with the healing process. And perfume or cologne to make yourself smell nice and be more presentable. And so, just like those physical things that we can relate to on a day-to-day basis, so is the sweetness of a man or a woman's friend. And they give them hearty or heartfelt counsel. Not just fleeting, but heartfelt, prayerful counsel. Somebody comes to you and says, what do you think I ought to do? I'm not sure. I've got this opportunity. And somebody who would prayerfully consider that thing and then give them godly or heartfelt counsel. Moving on with the same theme of a friend, in verse 10 we find this. Do not forsake your friend or your father's friend, nor go to your neighbor's house in the day of calamity. Better is a neighbor nearby than a brother far away. It's the idea of holding on strong to godly friendships. That we should take these bonds of friendships that God develops and brings friends into our lives. And these friendships should even go beyond just one generation. In other words, somebody that's your parent's friend could very well be your friend as well. And look for those friends. Look for those godly Christians. Don't just look for somebody your age, but if you're older, look for younger folks that you can mentor in the Lord. If you're younger, look for somebody older who's got more life experience, who can mentor you, and be friends that you can encourage one another, strengthen one another. In Solomon's life, we see this exemplified in 1 Kings chapter 5, where he cultivates a kindly and a strong friendship with his father's friend, David's friend, Harmon. But we also see Solomon's son not doing what Solomon said here. He had unprincipled and he was contempt for Solomon's advisors. Solomon's son, you remember, part of the destruction or the falling apart of the Israeli empire after Solomon passed on the scene was because Solomon's son didn't listen to his dad's counselors, instead got a bunch of young guys with him, and they said, well, let's just increase taxes. People aren't paying enough. And as all of us know, nobody likes to pay more taxes. We don't like to pay more taxes, and they didn't back in ancient days in Solomon's time frame. And because Solomon's son failed to listen to the counsel of his dad to honor the friendship, it led to the division of his kingdom. And of course, who's our best friend? You might think of a person, somebody maybe from high school, the best man or the maid of honor that stood up at your wedding or something else like that. But there's a friend that sticks closer than a brother. And that friend, of course, is Jesus Christ. Jesus is your very best friend. He's still Lord, He's still God, but you will find nobody who's more loyal than Jesus Christ. He's also the same one who will rebuke you, correct you when you're wrong. He'll do it in kindness, in compassion. He'll do it always looking to restore you to a right relationship. Whatever you do, do not turn your back on the friendship that you have with Jesus Christ. Don't turn your back on Him. Pursue Him. Invite Him into every aspect of your life. Don't say to Jesus, well, this is my Sunday morning, and Jesus, you're invited in here, but Monday, I've got work, I've got this thing to do, and I got to take care of business, and so I'm going to put you on the back corner. Don't do that. Invite Him in every day, in your family time, in your personal time, at work. Invite Jesus in. Pray and say, Jesus, would you guide me today, even at work? You might say, but my work has nothing to do with spirituality. Yes, it does. In your attitude and how you conduct your job, how you do things. I'll tell you this, your job won't get any easier, but your attitude will change as you invite Jesus in on a daily basis. Jesus, use me today. Make me the best, whatever you are. Make me the best at this. And give me your heart, your attitude, even as I do these things. So please, do not forsake, do not turn your back on your own personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Make sure to pursue it every day. And you might say, but I don't know how. I've got a simple answer for you. Ask. That's it. Ask. Maybe you get busy. Maybe you left in the morning, you left late, and I was going to have a devotional time. I was going to pray, but now life is hectic and I'm already on the road. The moment you think about that, then say, Jesus, help me. Lord, give me the right attitude today. If you can, arrive a few minutes early and sit in your car and pray. Lord, bless my day. Help me to do my job and give me the right attitude today. Have a small devotional time. Again, that could be, maybe it's on the way home after work and sit in the parking lot or the driveway in front of the house before you step in and just say, Lord, help me today. Help me be a godly mom, a godly father, a godly husband, a godly wife today. In this next few moments. If you will begin to do that on a regular basis, you'll be amazed at how God will meet you. The circumstances of your life are not going to be changed, but your attitude towards them certainly will. And that's what we're looking for. That's what God wants to do in our lives. Moving on to verse 11 here. My son, be wise and make my heart glad, that I may answer him who reproaches me. In other words, this is the idea of Solomon speaking to his son again. It could be for women as well. But in other words, the son can either publicly disgrace a father or a mother, or a son or a daughter can publicly bring honor to their mother and father by what? The choices that they make. If you're a son, if you're a daughter, understand that you reflect on your family, whether you like it or not. And so endeavor to be a blessing. Verse 12, a prudent man foresees evil and hides himself. A simple man passes on and are punished. You see, wisdom. Now this is wisdom which is derived from what? The fear of the Lord, which is a wisdom, in other words, is putting into daily practice your relationship with Jesus Christ. Just like I was describing just a moment ago about sitting in your car and praying before you walk into work or before you walk into the house. So wisdom will lead a man or a woman to anticipate danger, especially spiritual danger, and then to take action to avoid that danger. In other words, we talked a few minutes ago about our emotions. Maybe you've had a really bad day and you're ready to walk in the house and kick the dog. But if you were to stop and pray before you walk into the house, Jesus is your faithful friend who can rebuke you and say, you know what, Duane, your attitude right now stinks. And you need to change your attitude before you kick the dog. Because at least in my house, my dog's got a big old mouth and it's going to chomp on my foot or something else like that. But here's the idea. Before you go off and do something or say something, pray. Invite the Lord in, and that's wisdom. Wisdom from a relationship with Jesus Christ will lead you to anticipate danger and then take action to avoid it. Again, that might just be 30 seconds out in the car or 30 seconds at lunchtime or whatever else it might be, and say, Lord, would you calm me down because my emotions are running strong right now. Lord, I'm offended by this thing or that thing. And I really know in my logic, I know that I really shouldn't be offended, but still I am. So Lord, would you bring Christ's control in my life? That's wisdom. And it's practical things as well. You know, it's probably not the wisest thing to walk down a dark alley with a couple $100 in your hand. It's looking for somebody to rob you or something else like that. So again, take action. Hide the money, put it in your pocket. Don't walk down that dark alley. And then the same thing with spiritual things. Somebody invites you to go to some place or to do something, and you know it's not spiritually healthy for you. Then take action to avoid it. I'm not going there. I know you want me to go there, but I know for me it's spiritually unhealthy, so I'm not going to participate in that. I'm not going to go there. That's the idea. The simple, on the other hand, those who just bumble along and run into trouble all along, those that don't have an active, vibrant relationship with Jesus Christ, those who are not praying on a daily basis, they tend to run into trouble like this. They tend to allow their emotions to control them. They tend to say things that later on they regret. Why? Because they didn't put into practice. And again, wisdom is putting into practice the relationship that you have. So don't be the simple person. Don't be the fool who rejects God, but be the wise person who says, God, would you intervene in my life and give me wisdom on how to interact? Maybe it's your kids, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it has nothing to do with family, but it's something about something else going on in your life. Ask the Lord for wisdom. You see, the naive and those who are untrained in wisdom, who haven't exercised themselves in wisdom, are blind to the potential danger around them. And they eventually bear the bad consequences for their actions, bad consequences for their blindness. You don't need to be spiritually blind. We're not talking about a bunch of book knowledge. You don't have to go to seminary. What you just need to be is somebody who's simply trying to follow Jesus. I can tell you this, sometimes the wisest people are back there in the children's ministry right now because they have simple faith and they just want to know what's right and what's wrong. And sometimes we as adults, we need to be more like that. Lord, would you give me faith like a child to simply follow what Jesus calls me to do? And if we were to put that into practice in a daily life, you and I would grow spiritually by leaps and bounds. Verse 13, take a garment from him who is surety for a stranger and hold it in pledge for his surety for a seductress. Remember, surety is loaning people stuff. And the idea, the concept here is you loan somebody something but they don't have the means to repay it. And so it is saying take a deposit if you're loaning something out. Again, we're not supposed to be surety or supposed to be giving loans out at exorbitant rates to other people. But it is especially foolish when you know somebody doesn't have any money to repay the loan, to give them a loan. It's also foolish for us when we don't think we can pay it reasonably, to agree to borrow a bunch of money even though we don't have any clue how to pay it back. Let me just give you a word of caution. Those payday loans, they charge very high interest rates, and you're shocked about how easily it is to get into significant debt by those payday loans. Same thing with credit cards. Credit cards can be a tool, but understand this, oftentimes they charge quite exorbitant rates, 25% sometimes. And the problem with a credit card is when you buy something, it doesn't hurt until a month later. And because of that, we can easily get ourselves into significant debt. So be wise about that. Now, credit cards can be a useful thing. I understand that. But just be wise in how you do that, and be careful that you don't get yourself to become slaves to whoever you borrowed money from. Verse 14, he who blesses his friend with a loud voice, rising early in the morning, it will be counted to him as a curse. Now, if you're a morning person, this verse is for you to be careful of how you conduct yourselves, okay? The first part of that verse. Now, those of you who are not morning people, you like the second half of that verse a lot more, because those people who are loud in the mornings. I remember one time years and years ago involved with youth ministry, and me and another guy, we thought this was hilarious. Keith Green had a song that in the song, the lyrics said, how long are you going to sleep? Arise, wake up, something like that. I forget the exact lyrics. And so we had this sleepover at church. And of course, with youth, nobody wants to go to sleep, right? They want to go to sleep at like 5 in the morning. And so they had slept for 2 hours, and he and I got this stereo system. We cranked it all the way up, got just that line in the song, and said, wake up. And we were shocked. Everyone else who was there didn't see the humor in it. We thought it was extremely funny. But everyone else was, well, if they had known this verse, they would have counted it as a curse that we had the stereo cranked up that loud. But it's more than just being loud in the morning. It's more than just clanking pots and pans in the morning or something else like that. It's the idea of an over-the-top greeting or blessing meant to flatter somebody, to manipulate them, and especially to do it early in the morning. In other words, to show up on somebody's doorstep and say, man, you are the best person in the world, even though they've got sleep still in their eyes and they've got the bedhead going on, and you're just flattering them. It's somebody who aims to excessively praise somebody at the inappropriate time. It's also the idea of somebody using an unnatural voice. And this timing betrays or reveals that they're really a hypocrite. So be careful about those who, again, use excessive flattery, especially when you know that you didn't do something and yet they're giving you all kinds of credit for something. Be careful, because they're going to come back and request something from you in just a few moments. Verses 15 and 16, and this is a familiar thing. We've talked about this many times as we've gone through the book of Proverbs. And remember, this is a father writing to a son, but this could be just as well a mother applying this to her daughter. A continual dripping on a very rainy day, and a contentious woman are alike. Whoever restrains her restrains the wind, and grasps oil with his right hand. So again, this is an analogy. Now, you ever touch something oily? You work on a car or a motor, and you got oil all over the place, and you can't grip something. Maybe you're cooking, and you got cooking oil spilled onto the spatula or something else, and it becomes very slippery. That's the idea. Have you ever tried to hold back the wind? When it's windy out here, and it's not windy today, but in a couple days, I'm sure it will be windy again. And can you imagine yourself standing up there and trying to hold back the wind, and how silly that is? So it is the contentious woman or the contentious man. The contentious is somebody who's always argumentative, always finding something wrong. And it's like a continual dripping on a rainy day. It's the idea that in a practical sense, if it's a rainy day, we seek shelter. So you sought shelter, maybe in a shed or a house, but you get there and then the house is constantly dripping. In other words, you might as well have been out in the rain. And of course, the problem with a leaky roof is it causes destruction inside the house. It causes mold and decay. It causes things to fall apart inside the home if there's a leaky roof. Unfortunately, we have a leaky roof here in this building. Every time it rains heavy, we get water inside the building, or at least water stains on the ceiling tile. And if we're not careful and change them out, those ceiling tiles quickly turn into black and greenish, moldish sort of stuff. It looks disgusting. And if we don't fix it, if we don't keep up with it, it leads to destruction or physical damage to things inside the building. So it is in our homes. If we are constantly argumentative, if we are constantly contentious, if we're never satisfied, if nobody else in the home can ever do anything right, guess what you're doing? You're eroding away your very own home. You're eroding away and you're causing destruction in your very own home. And you may not recognize it the first time. Just like a leaky roof, you may not recognize it. A few drips, a few drops here or there. But all of us have experienced where water gets into where it's not supposed to be and the destruction that it causes. So it is somebody who's not appreciative of other people in your household, who's constantly, again, argumentative. That's the idea of contentious. Never satisfied. Be careful that that's not you. Does your other family members do everything just like you would do it? Nope, and they never will. But don't be contentious. Instead, if it's worthwhile, then correct them, teach them, train them. On the other hand, but don't constantly put them down. Maybe some of you have been exposed to that. Maybe you grew up in a home like that no matter what you did, it was wrong. Or maybe you've been exposed again to that kind of relationship, that kind of rapport, and understand it causes damage to the family. And if you've been doing that, ask the Lord to correct that you would not be contentious. Instead, you would be a blessing, that you would be building up your family instead of tearing them down. Verse 17 goes on to say this, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens the countenance of his friend. And again, this is drawing an analogy. If you want to sharpen a sword, an iron sword, you'd rub it against iron or your steel at home for your knives or whatever else. But the idea is that's how you sharpen it to make it an effective instrument, to make the knife or the sword. And it's the same idea that we as friends, as brothers and sisters in the Lord, that we would be open with one another and understand that there's going to be times when we rub elbows and we aren't going to be totally in harmony. But be open to that. Be open that your friend, your brother, your sister may actually be right and you might be wrong. That they would refine you and strengthen you. Again, that open rebuke is better than hidden love. The deceitful are the kisses of an enemy, but friendly are the wounds, or a blessing are the wounds of a friend. In other words, it's the idea of building one another up. It's not tearing one another down. The problem, of course, for you and I is if we become lonely or isolate ourselves. If we isolate ourselves as Christians, then there's nobody else in our life to sharpen us. And we become dull and unuseful for the Lord. The Lord has us as a body in Christ with different giftings, different talents, different likes and desires, but it's all for the benefit of one another. So don't forsake the fellowship of brothers and sisters together. Moving on to verse 18. Whoever keeps the fig tree will eat its fruit, so he who waits on his master will be honored. So again, a practical analogy in the physical realm. In the time of Solomon, people were farmers. Everybody understood this, and a fig tree was an extremely valuable tree. It produced fruit, but fig trees were difficult to grow. It took constant cultivation to make sure the fig tree would produce a bountiful crop. So in a practical way, if you have a fig tree in your backyard and then you take care, or you have a garden or something else, and you take care of it and you work it, you labor at it, then you get to be the one that gets to have that reward of it. Just like the person who waits on his master. And who's our master? Jesus Christ. Are you waiting on your master? Are you honoring him by how you live? Are you inviting him in and saying, Jesus, help me today. Jesus, I want to represent you well today at work, at family, when we go out for a picnic or whatever else you're going to do. Jesus, I invite you in and I want to honor you. And if you do that, guess what? You will reap tremendous spiritual benefits from that. Just like the farmer or the fig tree or the gardener reaps the crops from the tree or from the garden, you will reap spiritually if you cultivate that time with the Lord. Verse 19, as in water face reflects face, so a man's heart reveals the man. Just like when you look at calm water and how it can become like a mirror and you can see your own face in it, so is your heart revealed by how you act, how you behave. The feelings and the thoughts that come from our heart are revealed and reflected by how we interact with others. In other words, if your heart is filled with anger, guess how you're going to respond to others? In anger. If your heart instead is filled with the love, joy, and peace of Jesus Christ, how are you going to respond to others? In that love, joy, and peace. The circumstances may be exactly identical, but what a blessing when you have Jesus in your heart and you're seeking him on a daily basis, that you can be that godly influence of peace and love and harmony in the midst of a stressful situation. And may God work in your life that way. Verse 20, hell and destruction are never full, so the eyes of a man are never satisfied. Here's the sad truth. Hell never fills up, and God never says, hell is full and nobody else can go there. God doesn't want anybody to go to hell. God doesn't send anybody to hell. God wants everybody to come to heaven with him. God has prepared the way. He's given us the invitation that every soul on this earth can spend eternity with Jesus Christ. All we have to do is accept Jesus by faith and walk in that. Now, the sad truth is, if we reject that, if we play the fool and reject that, there is no other place other than hell for us. You see, there's not 3 options or 4 options. It's either eternity with Jesus Christ or eternity in hell separated from God. And just like hell is never satisfied, just like death is never satisfied, just like taxes are never satisfied, so is our natural, unregenerated hearts. There's always something to attract our fancy, isn't there? New car, a better car, a new tool, a new gadget, new piece of clothing. We have to be careful that, because we always can want something else. And be careful that the other guy or other gal has something that you want. Don't allow envy to develop in your heart. So just like hell and death and taxes are never satisfied, understand this, our human nature were never satisfied. Rockefeller, the first one, the one that became wealthy, was asked one time, and I've told you this before, but he was asked one time, how much money would it take to make you happy or satisfied? And at that time, he was a billionaire. At that time, he was the richest man, not in America, in the world. And his response was, a little bit more than what I have. You think if you win the lottery, you'll be happy? You won't. Whatever car or house, you think, oh, if I just had that house, I'd be happy? You won't be happy. If you're pursuing those things, you will never be satisfied. So be on guard. Verse 21, the refining pot is for silver and the furnace for gold, and a man is valued by what others say of him. So the refining pot is this, again, a goldsmith, a silversmith would take the metal, heat it up in a pot, and allow the impurities to go to the top and pull off the impurities, the dross, and you have a special pot that's designed for this to take the intense heat. It's designed for that. So also is the man or the woman who's valued by what? By what others say of them. Again, piggybacking on a verse earlier in this chapter. Let others praise you. It's so much better when somebody says, wow, this woman does this. She's talented at this, or this man is great at that. That is so much better than you or I boasting about what we can or can't do. So let another praise you. Again, nothing wrong with somebody praising you, nothing wrong with somebody recognizing your skills or your talents, but let it be not you promoting yourself. Instead, let it be others recognizing that. Verse 22, though you grind a fool with a mortar, with a pestle, along with crushed grain, yet his foolishness will not depart from him. So this is using language that we're not familiar with. Maybe you've seen at a drugstore, something like that. The mortar is like a little stone bowl, and the pestle is like a little hammer. You might crush pills in it. You might crush herbs and spices in it, and it crushes it to get all the essence of that herb or that spice out. And so it's the idea that something is being crushed. Here's the idea, though. The fool, again, the fool is somebody who rejects Jesus Christ. The fool, even though they're crushed by life, they won't get it until they accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. You run across people, maybe you have family members or friends who have just gone from catastrophe after catastrophe after catastrophe, and yet they won't surrender to Jesus Christ. And you say, what foolishness this is. And it is. Somebody that's caught up in some sort of habitual sin acts this way sometimes, where they suffer consequences for whatever they're in bondage to, and yet they're unable to break free until they surrender first and foremost to Jesus Christ. And then Christ is able to set them free. Not saying there's not struggles with temptations, but Christ is able to set them free. So in spite of rough treatment or consequences for their sin, the person without a relationship with Jesus Christ keeps going through the same patterns over and over. May you and I not be that way. Now let's finish up the rest of this chapter, verses 23 through 27. Be diligent to know the state of your flocks, to attend to your herds, for riches are not forever, nor does a crown endure to all generations. When the hay is removed and the tender grass shows itself, the herbs of the mountains are gathered in, and the lambs will provide your clothing, the goats for the price of a field, and you shall have enough goat's milk for your food, and the food of your household, and the nourishment for your maidservants. It's just looking at practical things from their lifetime, that in other words, you have to be diligent. If you were a shepherd, you have to be diligent to know the condition of your flock. You have to know which sheep or have a difficult time, which ones need more care or concern, more food or more water. If you're growing things, you need to, certain plants, you have to take greater care for them or plant them in the right location, that sort of idea. And it's the idea in our lives that hard work or diligence in our work, diligence in our planning, that knowing the state of what's going on. In other words, as a practical example, how much money do you have in your bank account? Do you keep track of that? How much money do you have, and do you plan? Do you coordinate things out? Oh, I shouldn't buy this thing because I got to put gas in my car, or whatever else it might do. Rent is due at the end of the month, so I need to save this for rent. Or are you just a person that just lives at the spur of the moment? And if you're doing that, especially with your finances, you're going to come to ruin. So it's the idea of somebody who's diligent, who works hard, who knows what they have, and be a good manager over what God has provided for you. Another term for that is a steward. If God's given you a car, be a good steward over that car. Maybe you're not a great mechanic. Maybe you don't know anything about mechanics, but you can still be a good steward over it, to take care of it so that car will last you a lot longer. That kind of idea. But it's the idea of knowing the condition of what things are at, knowing the condition of your family. If you're a mom, if you're a dad here, do you know the condition, the spiritual condition of your children, so that you can help them to grow in the Lord? Do you understand that? And it's also the same idea that we need to develop within ourselves diligence to lead our families, diligence to manage things. We're not talking about being regimented, but instead we're looking at being a good manager or being a good steward. Just like the grass is going to fade, so if you want grass later on, you might want to store it up. The bluebonnets are out right now and they look beautiful. If you want pictures with your children in the bluebonnet field, now's the time to go take them. In another month, they're not going to be there, are they? So take advantage of that when that comes up. There might be opportunities to do this thing or that thing, and that's the concept here, is that you would take advantage of what you have set in front of you. Be diligent, whether it's with your plants or your work or your home life, and then you'll see the benefits from that. But again, it all stems from a right relationship with Jesus Christ. You being wise is not about intellectual knowledge, but it's about putting your relationship with Jesus Christ into practice on a daily basis. The book of Proverbs is giving us a constant contrast between the wise woman, the wise man, and the fool. And the difference is, what do they do with Jesus? That's essentially it. What do we do with Jesus? Do we fully embrace him and walk with him and invite him into every aspect of our lives? Or do we reject him? And I want to encourage you to invite Christ in to your life, every aspect of your life. Don't have any hidden secrets in your life. Let Christ in. Let him minister. Let him rebuke you if you need rebuke, but let him be that faithful, loyal friend who will point out where you're wrong and then point you back to a right relationship with him.